Again, thank you very much for time is so valuable, and thank you for spending some time with us and sharing some input. We have great representation. We have higher ed well represented. We have the sugar beet industry well represented. We have manufacturing and the small business. We have a lot of great input here. Technology. We have we have a great entrepreneur here, Barry Batchelor. So we've got. I'm giving you a heads up, men, to start thinking, because I'm going to call them if you don't volunteer. But we would love. We're taking notes. We're filming, and so who would like to get us started? Jim?
No.
My name is Jim Garten. I'm with the Greater Fargo Moorhead Economic Development Corporation, and being here for just 6 months, coming from Michigan, I've learned one thing, and from an economic development standpoint, our biggest challenge to move forward is going to be workforce. Tim mentioned about the jobs in the Bach, and the July jobs report from the Job Service of North Dakota stated there were more available jobs in Cass County than there was in all of the Bakken area. So it's not just there, it's here. We have an incredible need for jobs. And what we found in Michigan was the immigration issue was a paramount issue too, because what we found over the years is those immigrants who were coming here, who went to the universities, on a proportionate share, they created more new businesses and new jobs and created more excitement within their communities and environment. And this is limiting that capability over the last several years. So it's a critical issue for us as economic developers, because as we move forward, if we don't have the workers, if we don't have the skills and the educated levels, our businesses will have to take products and manufacturing elsewhere where they do. So we are riding the crest right now, but unless we address these issues, it will have a negative impact on this market.
Thank you. Agriculture is very important to our part of the country. Dave, you want to share some of your thoughts on immigration from your perspective?
To be completely honest, I'm more interested in the labor law than I am immigration law. Some of you here will understand that better than others, but I take everything you say very seriously, and it makes a lot of sense. Now, truthfully, the makeup of our workforce is pretty local. We've been bringing some other people in lately, but they tend not to be immigrants. But what you say is exactly right. And
what kind of farming?
Well, you can't look out the window here, but look a little bit farther, you'll see sugar beets all over. This is the largest sugar beet producing region in the country, and maybe you don't know this, but more than half the sugar in the country comes from sugar beets, and we're the largest processor in the country right here. It's been a pretty stable workforce. I'm not going to go into that today. There's some recent things that have changed the makeup a little bit, but we are certainly sensitive to being able to bring in skills. That certainly is the problem. And I think this is frankly an educational issue about what kind of skills are coming out of not the four-year institutions, but the two-year institutions, and that kind of labor element of our labor force. I can concur completely with what you're saying, because you just can't take a particular segment of that makes up the diversity of the workforce in terms of where the skills are sourced from, and just say we're just not going to allow that to flourish. I mean, I'm looking out the window here at a dead branch on a tree, and it's almost like we've let a dead branch sit there and just do nothing about it. We have to do something about it.
Before you sit down, for the benefit of our Chicago guests especially, introduce yourself, Dave, please.
Sorry?
Would you introduce yourself, please?
I'm sorry. You knew me, so I thought everybody did. My name is David Berg, and I'm president of American Crystal Sugar Company here.
Thank you.
Go Bison.
Oh, did you raise your hand, Dean?
Yes, I did, as a matter of fact.
Please introduce yourself first.
Hi, I'm Dean Brashani, the president of North Dakota State University. Go Bison again. One of the neat things about a university is you're working with these incredible young minds, and you get to meet a lot of their parents. And sometimes you even hear complaints about things that the university isn't doing well. It's a pleasure at North Dakota State. I mean, they even like our food service. I don't know what's going on, but we don't get a lot of complaints. But the one common complaint I hear from students and their parents is why can't you hire American professors? Because we're challenged to understand the language, particularly in quantitative fields. And my shameless response has become, there aren't any. And they kind of look at me like, well, what do you mean? We have created a society that is scared of anything that's quantitative, anything that's science or math based. And when I'm talking to parents, I say it's your fault. Because I'll bet you didn't encourage your son or daughter to take more math classes. You didn't encourage them to take more physics classes. You didn't encourage them to take more chemistry classes. And 9 out of 10 of them kind of look down at their shoes and go, well, yeah, you got me on that one. Immigration is the only immediate resolve of that situation. I'm sure this percolates out to in every industrial sector as well. It will take generations to turn that ship around as far as parents encouraging their children. We don't have 50 to 100 years to wait for that ship to turn. We have to bring in people from cultures where quantitative fields and science and math-based fields are encouraged. That's the only solution we're going to have, both for our culture and for our economy, is to do that. And when I have the chance to talk through that with parents, they ultimately get it, but I don't think they realize how deep that hole is for our society and our economy. Again, 50 to 100 years. And that would be if there was the momentum right now to change that. And I don't think there is that momentum. We're still encouraging young kids, as soon as they have trouble with a math class or a physics class or a science class, well, it's okay. You don't have to take any more of those hard classes. We need to be encouraging our young people to take those hard classes, but we also need to be encouraging both parents and the people around us to understand we have painted ourselves into an economic corner. We have no choice but to rely on the immigration of people from outside of this country who are eager to be involved with those fields that require quantitative skills.
That's a really great point that nobody in any of our meetings has made. That's fantastic. I mean, it's horrible. It's a horrible fact, but that's really. And you know, just because we're saying fix the immigration system, we're not saying don't help Americans get interested in science and math. Obviously, both have to happen at the same time.
Barry?
I'm Barry Batch. I'm a local small businessman. I agree completely with what Dr. Prashani said, but I think the problem here, you know, we have somewhat of a dysfunctional situation going on in Washington, and I hope that the message that you're working on gets heard. But I can't emphasize enough the importance of turning the country around from a philosophical standpoint. People, the young people today, they are bombarded by media, and their idea of what they want to be when they grow up is to buy a company in Silicon Valley and flip it, and be rich at the age of 26, and not necessarily a science or math-based focus, but society has an overwhelming influence on young people, and so do parents, of course. I think it's important that when I look back, I grew up in the 60s, and at that time we had an arms race going on called the space race, but it was pretty inspirational for a generation of Americans. I mean, I grew up when Wernher von Braun and the guys were launching missiles and the moon thing was going on, and a generation of young people went to Georgia Tech and NDSU and other great schools, wanting to be involved in something as exciting as that. And it was a nation that felt empowered by technology. Today, I don't sense that in the nation. And as Dr. Prashani said, it's going to take a generation to turn that around. In the interim, we as a small company, we have hired quite a number of interns and young people from that had H-1B visas, and through one issue or another could not stay. So you're right, we're importing a lot of people, educating them, and then sending them away. On the other hand, the nation is essentially broke, and we are importing a large number of immigrants that cannot easily contribute, and indeed draw on society, and I think that's an issue that needs to be addressed as well. And I think somewhere in this whole Gaussian distribution of talent, we need to focus on a few things where we can win. And I would encourage your group, when you bring this forward to whatever authoritative body you bring it forward to pick a few of these. But I do think that the need for this nation to have educated people on science, technology, and math, bring them in, educate them, and retain them, is paramount in my mind. That would be my opinion.
Let me just add to what Barry said. At Microsoft, we recruit the cream of the crop. We recruit a lot of college kids every year. We don't pay attention if they're foreign national or not. We recruit the very best, then we have to worry about the H-1B visas. Well, it got so bad several years ago that Microsoft set up an R&D center in Vancouver, and we had a young woman several years ago that we recruited from North Dakota State, very bright. We wanted here in our R&D team, couldn't get the visa, so she went to Vancouver. That's what our policies are forcing companies like Microsoft to do, and it's incomprehensible. Bruce?
Hi, I'm Bruce Rayford. I'm the provost at NDSU. Go Bison.
That was some horns.
I'd like to follow up on some President Petrani's comments. Where I'm going is your comment about taxpayer expense. I'd like to mention the Lumina Foundation, however, they project by 2025 that there'll be 70% of the citizens in North Dakota who have an education beyond high school.
Wow.
At which point in time we'll be #1 in the nation. We currently are #4 on the way up. We arguably could currently be the #1 in both associate's degree, master's, and bachelor's per capita in the United States. So there is a certain amount of wherewithal and thought and leadership here that I think you're right to poll and try to capture. I think we have a saying that being Midwesterners, and I'm thinking more of the mountain plains, maybe a little bit of the Midwest in that as well, that don't look to the east for help. Don't look too far west. And if you're looking for engineers, look to NDSU. And so NDSU every year produces 1% of the nation's engineers, and a very large percentage of those are domestic students. So there is a business model that I think we have developed, and certainly we can scale that. And now to the issue of that taxpayer expense, that if we're looking to build diversity and build the talent from the international talent pool, which is just enormous, and have those students come to the United States, then exactly who pays for those students to come here to be educated with the expectation that they'll stay? And I think that the world has changed. Spent a lot of time with the Council of Graduate School and the NSF looking at these issues, that now foreign governments have realized the value of paying for their students to come to the United States with the expectation that they will return home. So that time has passed. We need to have a more realistic view of if we want to benefit from the talent of these students, and then ultimately the H-1B problem would need to be solved too. What's the business side of that equation look like? So just some thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, that's really interesting, and those are amazing numbers about North Dakota. The only thing I would sort of say back to round out the conversation is it's not an either-or between homegrown talent and foreign talent, right? I mean, every country, and it's not because Americans are inadequate that we need foreign talent. Every country in the world is competing for foreign talent. It's like, what coal and iron ore were in a different century, foreign talent is today. So even if we're creating great Americans, you're also going to want the smartest from somewhere else. So it's
I guess I'm just after growing what talent we can here in North Dakota.
Absolutely.
I have had several people in the room apologize to me that they would have to go recruit students from South Dakota. Just not enough.
I'm Snyder Goki with the Goki Immigration Law Office. One of the issues that I think is kind of the biggest crack in our, the most broken in our immigration system is but I haven't heard talked about very much, is the catch-22 of the unlawful presence bars. Right now we have, with the new deferred action, I've had a couple of young people come in, and these were highly motivated young people. We have 11 million people who are here unlawfully. None of those people can get business visas. anyone who's been here for until age 19, if they depart to try to straighten out their status, they will incur a 10-year bar on returning. We have, this ridiculous catch-22 where anyone who's been in this country unlawfully present for 6 months, if they depart to try to straighten themselves out, they have a 3-year bar. And if they've been here for a year and they depart, they face a 10-year bar on returning. And so none of these people can get themselves straightened out. And just as we've got all of this intellectual capital locked up, and they really can't excel. So both and everyone who transgresses this law, they cannot get a business visa, and they're out of the running for, and I've had a number of H-1Bs who have had minor screw-ups, and they have left their job, didn't realize they had to leave right away, and now they can't get a new visa in the country, and if they depart, they'll incur a bar. And I have not ever learned the rationale behind the bars, and they are something that should be addressed.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, kind of one of the other sort of things we've thought about in putting together the report, obviously we're aiming at Washington, and we want to kind of take the Midwest voice to Washington, but we're also trying to give people who want to help educate people here, in your communities, sort of give you some ammunition. And one of the pieces of the report is a little kind of box sidebar about how hard it is to use the legal system. When I go out and I talk to folks on airplanes and in focus groups and stuff, people say, well, why don't they just go down to the post office and pick up their papers? Unskilled, unauthorized, and skilled people. It's surely you just apply and it's easy. It's anything but easy. I mean, the people who are here illegally, there's virtually no recourse, but even skilled people. The H-1B process, it's supposedly streamlined, and it is compared to the other visas, but an H-1B visa costs, by the time you're done, $5,000. By the time you stay to get your green card, it's 10 years and $10,000. And I sort of got the number, I'm rounding around the numbers, but that's the scale of things. You wait 10 years, and you're here 10 years in limbo, where you're not sure, am I really going to be able to settle here? And where your spouse can't work. So, just educating people about how broken the system is part of what we're trying to do.
We do have some manufacturing expertise in the room that I would like to leverage while Tom and Howard and Randy, like to get some of your thoughts. Howard, you're in the back. You want to start that dialogue?
I'm Howard Dahl, and I'm grateful. Whoops, my foot fell asleep here. Grateful that David leads a company that raises sugar beets, because we build sugar beet harvesting equipment, and we have 800 of our sugar beet combines running in Russia alone. And we have a number of Russian employees here that we spend a fair bit on their H-1B. There's some others that we'd like to bring here, including a couple Russian engineers that we would like to. We have a situation in our factory in Wishick, North Dakota, where we would put on 60 to 70 more people, invest in a plant, but there's no people available in a small town. So we aren't even thinking of there. We need to hire 60 people in Wahpeton right now. And and Tom, I'm sure, is a similar situation. I was in the Bakken Formation last week. I'm audit chair of the Minneapolis Fed Board, and we took our board out there. And it was an incredible eye-opener for them. 5,000 people employed in the oil industry 5 years ago, 45,000 today. And the word we heard is, if things go the way they could go, Williston will be a city of 100,000 people by 2030. That's a possibility. If Harold Hamm is right on the number, the total number of barrels that are available. So it's a very exciting time for North Dakota, but we are needing people. My one comment I would make is Manitoba may have the most exceptional immigration policies of any place, and I would really encourage you to talk with Art DeFair, head of the Palliser Furniture Company, who's been at the forefront of that immigration policy. They've done it right, they've done it well, and they have the full support of all their citizens the way they've done it. So I think we could learn something from them as far as best practices.
That's very helpful.
Tom, you want to add to that?
Sure. My name is Tom Shorma, and I'm CEO, president of a second-generation family, primary sector family business in Wapaton. 5 years ago, we had 70 employees, and today we have over 200. And what changed 5 years ago was that I was introduced to a student from North Dakota State University who was in the graduate program, and I was using him, or asked to use him to do some research for me to find some alternative supply channels. We manufacture rubber conveyor belting for farm equipment and sell it all over the world. In fact, more than 60% of our company revenues come from customers outside of the United States. And we are in need of a new supply channel for industrial textiles. And I was introduced to this student and spent 20 minutes explaining to him what I was looking for him to do some research on. And he listened carefully and looked up at me at the end of the conversation. And I said, "Can you help me?" And he said, "Yeah, I can help you. I know where to go to get that material for you." And I said, "Well, I've been in this business 30 years and I don't know where to go." He goes, "Well, I'm an industrial fabric engineer. I'm a textile engineer from India." And 5 years later, he ended up joining us under an H-1B visa, and has allowed us to be more competitive around the world. So today we have over 200 people in 2 campuses. And he's now in his second H-1B visa, in line for his green card. So I can speak that one student from one campus has helped us change our business to be internationally competitive. And if he doesn't get his green card, I'm going to be in trouble. So I'm leaving that up to Snyder to help us get that confirmed. So,
What a great story.
That is a great story. Amazing.
Randy?
Thank you. My name is Randy Schwartz. I'm the director for the Dakota Manufacturing Extension Partnership, and I've been doing this for about 12 years. And I would say that in terms of mobilizing my peers in other Midwestern states, let me know what I can do to help. We have centers across the United States, and of course the Midwest is manufacturing home for many, many great companies, and my fellow directors work with nearly all of them. So if we can help, let us know.
Good.
These gentlemen have already said what probably needs to be said from a perspective that's much closer to the issue than certainly I am, but we've had the pleasure of working with probably about 800 companies in North and South Dakota over the years. And getting to Howard's point about Manitoba, great comment. There is roughly 140,000 manufacturing employees from Sioux Falls to Winnipeg. And Winnipeg is a bit of an anchor for that group, with about 65,000 employees up there alone. And those companies, as well as most of the companies in Red River Valley all the way down to Sioux Falls, are doing very well. So when we hear about manufacturing, or we hear about the industries that are looking for employees, whether they're really talented and skilled or maybe entry level, manufacturing is right there. And I think Jim from Fargo Moorhead Economic Development said it earlier. This is the issue. The other thing that we have the pleasure of doing with the manufacturing community is working on a lot of best practices with them. And when we talk about competing globally, and you look at who's really doing well in manufacturing, you know, who are the leaders in certain industry sectors across the world, the world is getting so much smaller and so compressed that best practices in manufacturing are getting more readily available every day. Right now, you know, manufacturers look to best practices from all over the world, not just internally, but what can they do that somebody else has already proven how to do, whether it's with immigration or existing employees, that type of thing. So the one thing that I think we need to, if speaking on behalf of the manufacturing industry, there's so many good things going on in this industry, including research and development, the commercialization of technologies, the need for the engineers and the great talent that the universities are producing, as well as the unskilled and the technical degrees. So
maybe just a plug for manufacturing. Just keep a great eye open for manufacturing. It's still our nation's largest new wealth creator, and hopefully will continue to be. So.
Thank you, Randy. Out of my own curiosity, I'd love to hear from a unique small businessman, Fargo Jet Center. Jim?
Thanks, Don. I'm Jim Sweeney. I'm president of Fargo Jet Center, but I'm primarily here today. We have another aviation company called Weather Modification Incorporated, a 50-year-old North Dakota company that primarily does atmospheric research and all types of aviation services around the world. And that's really what caught my interest today. And it's we end up working in various countries around the world. As Tom indicated earlier, about 70% of our business is come from overseas. And when we're operating and working in foreign countries, we've had many occasions to come upon a bright young individual, want to get them over here. We try to encourage them to come to NDSU or the University of North Dakota to continue or advance their education. And then we want them to stay and to work and join our company. And those are always challenges. I mean, just getting, I can think of instances of trying to bring young Indian engineers in and constantly running up against those challenges and struggles and try to get somebody in. So, you know, not dozens of numbers, but in our perspective, we always have a handful of challenges on bringing students and visa and immigrants into the United States. Just a real side note too, when you mentioned Canada, we do a fair amount of work in Alberta, and we try to get on temporary basis. Since NAFTA has come into place, we have increased challenges trying to get our employees to work in Canada, and that's been just a real challenge. It's, you know, they're so scared, even when and I'm sure many of you go up there on business, we get drilled when we go into Canada for a meeting, and because they think I'm going to go up there and stay and work, and that's been a huge challenge for us also, just having people up there temporarily do their job, do something small, and certainly plan to come home. And I guess the one challenge, and I'll finish with, I'm interested to hear your comments on where are we at with the Midwestern congressional delegates in Washington. Tell us what we can do to help there. North Dakota, we have a very small delegation that we all know. It's easy.
Yeah.
But how does the rest of the
Yeah, that's a really good question, and so I'm an advocate, right? When I'm my organization, Immigration Works USA, we do advocacy. The Chicago Council doesn't do advocacy, and they've gotten a little nervous when I started talking about individuals at the meetings. So maybe we should do that offline. I mean, I have lots to say, but I'm not supposed to.
I think at a high level, all of us can work with our federal delegation, and this report will equip you with some great facts. And let me.
And it's really necessary. I mean, that's the other thing to say. I mean, it's you know, it's Lindsey Graham, who was from South Carolina, who, you know, kind of has been one of the brave Republicans on this. He said something once that sort of, you know, kind of sums it up. He says, immigration is a jobs issue, jobs for politicians. Because, you know, if you do it wrong, the voters are waiting at the polling, you know, lined up at the polling booth to punish you. And those guys really need some cover. And, you know, when I was involved in 06 and 07, you used to hear offices say, I mean, I literally heard a conversation between two staffers once where they said, our email is running 400 to 1, and it was 400 people saying, build a wall, send them all home. And the other guy said, well, at least you're getting one. And I mean, the opponents shut down the Senate switchboard in 06 and 07 saying, don't do it. And we really didn't have any grassroots. Because, you know, there's Latinos marching in the streets, and that's persuasive for progressive Democrats, but it's not really persuasive for the centrist Republican and Democratic votes that we need. And so business speaking out to say, get it done, or speaking quietly to say, get it done, is really, really critical. And, you know, you go into these offices and you have these meetings with the members, and I mean, again, it's like became kind of a, I could do it in advance. You know, you'd make the case, we need these workers and we need to be competitive and we need, and they'd stop you and they'd say, oh, I get it. And then would come, like I would set it to the I get it paragraph, because it would be, I get it, but I can't vote that way as long as my email is running 400 to 1. So, it's just, it sounds like we think, oh, duh, this is so obvious, they must understand it, but they might understand it, they might not, but they really need people going in there and telling them, do it, we need you to do it, it's okay to do it. And, again, I'd love to talk more with you and, get you engaged in what my organization does, but it's really important.
Anybody else?
Sure, Don, thanks. I'm Dan Hanaher. Just recently returned to Fargo after serving 3 years in the Obama administration as the SBA regional administrator in Denver. First a comment and then maybe an additional comment or question about the congressionals. And my first comment is that the president initiated the Startup America initiative with Steve Case and the startup group, and asked the SBA to take a lead in organizing those efforts around the country. So I participated in a number of those with startup, and particularly in the Boulder area, it was a lot of high-tech gazelles, fast growth companies that were participating in those meetings. And with every meeting, this issue rose to the top as the #1 issue for the agenda to go back to the president. And I think in large part that's why some of the executive orders that we've seen come down in the last year or so were generated. On the issue of congressionals, Jim, in your presentation I began thinking too about how can the Midwest have an impact when I think already they're largely on board on this issue, working with Senators Enzi and Thune and Hoeven on the Republican side, and the Democratic delegations across the Rocky Mountain region as well.
Enzi and Thune would be on board with starting piecemeal and doing some of the high-skilled stuff. Yeah, I think that's definitely right.
Right. I guess my question is, what kind of impact can the Midwest have when we already seem to be all on the same playing
they
field
could be
direction?
out there more. I mean, they're
Talking
not. I think if there was something moving, one would hope for their support, but one wouldn't exactly look to them for leadership. And so it's about that. I mean, there is one senator from the Midwest whose name starts with a G, who's kind of a problem from this state. But I mean, he's a big problem. And I mean, that's one of the things. Like I sort of hope that the region could sort of focus on trying to move him. I mean, it's not a secret. I mean, so in the last 6 months, and I know we're sort of coming to the end, but in the last for 6 years there was no movement on immigration. In the last 6 months, there started to be a little bit of thaw with folks on both R's and D's proposing these smaller fixes. For 6 years, no one would touch it. People I'd worked with closely in 06 and 07, would go the other way when they saw me coming in the hall. But in the last 6 to 9 months, there started to be thaws. And there was a bill that passed in the House that would have eliminated the country caps for both high-skilled visas and raised them for families. And that's not like adding new visas. It's a very small bore fix. But it means that we'll no longer be in the situation where India has the same number of visas as Monaco. Not that many people want to come from Monaco. A lot of people want to come from India. It passed in the House by 389 votes. I mean, you can't get 389 votes in the House for motherhood. It's unbelievable. Democrats and Republicans voting for this immigration fix. And it got to the Senate and it got held up by one Midwestern senator. So the Thunes and the Enzis of the world need to be more out front. And, because there are the sort of there's a whole wing of the Republican Party that's not favorable, and they kind of think they're in charge. So the Thunes and the Enzis need to be out front, and there's some obstacles that need to have some pressure applied.
Well, mine's a little under hodgepodge for 400 here, but to touch on a couple topics that have been talked about. When I think about educating students in college, I think it's to me, in talking to my colleagues, I think it's a wonderful thing if they have a faculty member that had some international exposure or came from a different country, because when we look at what is our business philosophy, well, we can't just sell in North Dakota to North Dakotans. Whether you're in the agriculture industry or you're making tractors, you're making computer equipment or anything. So we have to kind of parallel what's our business model versus what's our model in other areas with immigration and other things, because I think there are two ways of success for the students that are coming here for classes at any of the 3 campuses that I work with. I view it as if they come here and stay here, that is a win for us. They're filling jobs where they're very vitally needed. But if they do not choose to stay here, they're also the phenomenal door openers in other countries, so that when we go to other countries, they're the ones that we contact. They maybe rise to be business and industry leaders in their own right, and they can really open the door for us when we go on international trade delegations and the like, to really help us in terms of our business model, because that will be more and more prevalent. When we look at the international trade we have in North Dakota, we've really placed a greater focus on that. I think, and this is off to the side a little bit, one of the greatest things that you could ever watch or participate in is the naturalization ceremony. And I would encourage everyone who has never been to one of those to do that sometime in your life. I've been to them at Concordia College, MSUM's had them, and also at the federal courthouse, where a family member was part of that. And it is one of the most American things you could ever do, because they're here by choice. They're not here because they were just born here. They've chosen to come to the United States to live here, to make this their new life. And this is their new home by choice. And along those lines, one of the questions that came up was, this person was from Canada. And it took them about 7 years as a professional become a new American. And yet they said, well, but other people that come from, as refugees from war-torn countries to others, they have a much more of a fast track. How can we, maybe align those better so that everyone, has that fast track ability. So, so that that's one of the things in terms of looking at some solutions.
I agree on the naturalization.
As we wrap things up, any final thoughts?
I'm Deb Martins, and I do all the immigration at NDSU for the international professors and researchers. So every day I work with this, I live it, I hear the stories firsthand. I've been doing it for 15 years. When I first started, nobody went back to India and China or anywhere. Now they go back, and they're creating competition for us. And I don't know that Kaplan report where they said how many of the patents are coming from foreign nationals, and in MNCs it's even higher, the number of patents. The people that start the high-tech businesses, the percent, that data is excellent if you want to argue for high-skilled and immigrants. They're kids. Intel had their competition, for the young scientists or whatever. It was all kids of immigrants who were winning all that. They're the next generation of people that are creating this. The other thing, I teach American government class, and I had a guest speaker talking about the role of international trade and foreign policy, and she was telling our students about how immigration is really hurting our competitiveness. And the quote I remember her saying was, we were a manufacturing society, and we let our manufacturing go overseas, and we said, well, that's okay because we'll be an information society. Then we let our information go overseas, and we said, well, that's okay, we'll keep R&D. And now our R&D is overseas, more and more going overseas, and I see it with my own people going home all the time. We can't wait. We're losing our competitiveness. I mean, everything you said is everything echoing, but I don't know, maybe another person needs to say it again.
That's exactly right. You have to say it, we all have to say it again and again and again. That's the point.
Well, Tamara, a couple of thoughts,
this is
final
fantastic.
thoughts.
I mean, this is really for me, and it's here today, and it's my experience now through the region. I've been on the road 2 weeks. There is something really, we've said this all along, the council said this all along, there's something unique about the Midwest voice, but there's really something unique about the Midwest voice. And, you all do get it, and it's so important that you be lifting up your voices. So, we're thrilled to have you, get engaged in the council process. If you're interested in being part of the Committee of 500, please, talk to us. And if you're interested in doing advocacy and helping with that, as a next step, please talk to me. Thank you for being here.
Again, thank you for your commitment to immigration. Thank you for your commitment to our community. Thanks for all each of one of you do, and we really appreciate your joining us. We had a good dialogue and look forward to continuing this discussion. Ready, break.